I can run wild for the first 6 to 12 months of a war. Well, this is true because I actually did that. I mean, you have to understand the Japanese actually did a pretty good job when it came to pretty much a punching above their weight. You know? At least in that aspect. It's if you claim like the Japanese could have played better, they could have fought harder. I really do ask you what you would do better, because obviously you want to really be able to figure that out. And the same thing with the French too, because remember, they had the army and they had the ability to fight. If you haven't just read World War One history, you'll just realize pretty much all the way up to the Nivelle offensive, they were just pretty much doing frontal assaults on German machine gun nests. So I mean, it wasn't really the best strategy, but you have to admit they had no problem just like charging machine gun nests. So it's the ability for them to fight was there. A lot of the problem was this. No, fuck. No, we might have worked it. Good. Alright, like a lot of their problem was they just lost tactically in the Second World War. They rushed right into Belgium, and the Germans just cut off behind them. They ran right through the Germans just ran through the Ardennes, cut off all the French supply lines, and all the British supply lines for that matter too. And the Brits just ran off. The Britons basically just ran away to Dunkirk and left the French army pretty much ruined. Everything was done. They were forced to retreat, and the Germans just pretty much just want to make sure we're running. Yeah, we're running. And the Germans just pretty much, were able to get away that way. I don't want to say they got lucky because it was actually a work of genius. But, yeah, we're starting with Hungary, which is good. Pretty much just starting where we left off last time. But, you have to admit, the Germans overall got lucky with Fall Guild. They were able to, the goal of most German campaigns was to destroy their opponents in like 5 minutes flat. And the Germans did it in that case. They did it in 1870. They did it back over in Königgrätz, Schleswig-Holstein, even full Weiss. It's just pretty much if the Germans are fighting a war and it lasts more than 6 months, they're gonna end up losing it, which is sad. Well, I like to say that the Franco-Prussian War lasted longer than that, but pretty much the French were screwed. They're just doing some like little guerrilla warfare, stuff like that, while they're waiting for Paris to surrender. And if you read Prussian documents, you would realize that they were really scared of, a bunch of like little mindless guerrilla fighters. Oh, good, right. Enemies are my. Alright, we got an infantry. Give them the Rommel. If when we're going to war proper, I'm going to get myself field marshal. Who shall we pick? Yeah. You. Going to go to. Good. And you. Do good. Spy army. Oh, boop, boop. Yeah. don't have to worry about that. This group of Eins, Unstead, Kluge, Oder, Model. Let's go with Kluge. Yeah, no, we want some blah, blah, blah. What do we got for this? Slowly growing up. The forces are getting bigger. They're getting stronger. This is just flashing because of the MIFO bills. Which is kind of interesting. I mean, it's basically the Germans funded their whole rearmament program on IOUs. And I mean, Krupp, Rheinmetall, well, these companies were pretty much just making all these armaments, and they were getting paid by the German government with like a bunch of IOUs. So I just wonder if they ever made any money. You know, at least in that aspect, it's like these are the things I think about when I'm bored. But, you know, yeah. France likes just a little bit. Let's go with Britain now. Britain, I'm going to play friends with you. We're going to play patty cake. Alright, you want to play patty cake, Mr. Baldwin? Patty cake, patty cake. Make them all nice and happy so they're not that upset when we invade a sovereign nation. Krieg's Thunder. Krieg bitter. I think that's thunder. I mean, I know like one of the words for thunder is Donner. Donner and Blitz. Blitz and Donner. Whatever the hell you want to say it. My German isn't as good as I claim to be. But as we see here, we're slowly getting stronger. Army is 270. Well, it's like it was actually a lot bigger than Versailles. Versailles was only limited to 100,000. The Navy only had 15,000, so it's a lot more than you think. And my little armies are doing. My Air Forces are doing the cutesy pilot exercises. I could give an old thing to Rommel. Good. There you go. I mean, it's the funny thing is that the main. I'm not gonna train a transport fodder. I'm not gonna. You know, it's. I was reading a lot of things that to say like Rommel wasn't as good as he claims to be. The one thing you do have to admit that Rommel did have was he was pretty damn aggressive. Look over here, you know, especially during the Second World, you know, during the Battle of France, Geist Divisionen. That's definitely a guy you would want on your team. And you have to admit, down here, he did one hell of a good damn job. And especially, it's just one of the interesting things too is that it's just the whole command structure down there. It was just downright weird because Rommel, he was actually theoretically under the command of the Italian, Commando Supremo, which was the like high command of Italy, and Rommel pretty much just got his way. Are we gonna be bombed? %15%. Seems like here we get more output and we can create more crap. Get a little bit less output, but we get a little bit more attention. And I'm just gonna go ahead and gamble that we're gonna get bombed. Ideally, I don't want to get bombed, but I'm going to assume that we are. So a lot of it in that, it's overall, definitely would like to have Rommel on my team. Pretty much all of them. I mean, the Germans were pretty good at war. So for that aspect, I mean, I'm reading Third Reich in Power right now, so you could like read a little bit more about like the rearmament process. And he's kind of critical of like this part or that part, but I mean, it's a lot of it. I'll just be like, explain to me how you would like rearm a country for war in 7 bloody years, especially if your army was originally only 100,000 men. And a lot of it, of course, that has to go with von Seeckt, like. Whoever the commander of the Reichswehr was, he was able to make a strong cadre, so that way when Germany began rearming, there was, even though there were only 3,000 officers, a lot of the cases, even the enlisted soldiers during the Volkswende were eventually tapped for officer positions as well. There was this one book, 5 Jahren on 4 Front, like 5 years and 4 fronts, I think it was. It was just about like a junior sergeant in the Reichswehr, but as soon as war proper was declared, he was immediately commissioned and he finished the war as a major. So at least in that aspect, you have a situation where you have a cadre that, like, once rearmament begins, they sort of were able to make up for lost time, if you know what I mean. And for the most part, that's what you kind of do want. That 7th one. So it's. They had some sort of process together. How's that really doing? Yeah, I got this pretty much finished up. I mean, one of the more logical things would be to attack down this way, so at least this area is cut off. But, I mean, it's. What have we got? I got a Jagdgeschwader and a Kampfgeschwader. Yeah. Just train these little fellas up. What I'm thinking about, we'll start training probably September. At least that way we'll have some time to. What do we got here? Kriegsmarine, Seeflotte. Two battleships, 2 light cruisers. Seems like a suitable. Raider. We're obviously going to get units for the subs. I mean, you have to admit that, it's the problem with people say that Donetsk was a little bit too micromanaging when it came to his ships. Like, a lot of the cases too, just especially after, say, 1942 or so. After the Glitch happy times. Allies were just like reading, like, just sitting back, waiting till the subs reported their locations, and then they just went over and sunk the sub. You know, it's in that situation, you kind of do have to admit that. Hochseeflöte. Wasserrams. Wasserruben. Which are for buildings group trained the fleet line got 6 of these things. This was also one of the main problems when the war started. How many subs did they have? 36. Can't really build a pretty decent. You can't really build a good army with. I mean, you can be in a situation where, you know, if you're going to do like a Rudel attack process, you're not really going to be able to accomplish much if you only have 36 subs. And if the Germans were going to pull off a Handelskrieg, the only thing they could really do is, you know, especially, they would have really had to starve the United Kingdom before 42. I mean, this is in retrospect because how else are they going to... Okay, we got fight again. Because, you know, otherwise, how are you going to coordinate such a policy of destroying, you know, especially in convoys when they're beginning to be able to figure out where your subs are by listening to their radio signals? So a lot of that situation, you know, it's... If you're starting with 36 subs, you're slowly growing to probably like around... I don't know what the exact total amount was. I think it was like between 250 and 300. But it's like by the time you got enough subs to possibly destroy the whole convoy system, the United States was in the war for about a year, so they're beginning to build up enough tonnage to like counteract it. The United Kingdom is still doing more than well enough. All your troops are being destroyed in the east, and pretty much 90% of like all German output is going that way because that's where the main threat is. So it's like by the time you had those subs, the war is already over. So it's like if Donuts didn't have 200 subs in 1939, he wasn't going to be able to finish it off simply just because like the Allies had enough like time to like learn to adapt to everything. A good book to read is Iron Coffins. I mean, it helps show exactly like the viewpoint of, you know, the Kriegsmarine during, say, after the happy times. So you kind of just realize that you can't really win a war if you're going to be like bombed to death as soon as you leave port. And in a lot of cases, unfortunately, people don't really seem to understand that. You know, people are like, well, you could have done this, or you could have done that, or they could have been fought harder, or... I mean, no. Pretty much, like, the problem with the German strategic situation is that if they didn't destroy Britain in 1940 or 1941 at the latest, they wouldn't have won the war. And then instead, they decided to attack Russia, of course. They would have survived if they didn't attack Russia. Personally, in this campaign, I'm going to try to avoid it as long as possible. And I'm only going to do it if I'm friends with them or them. The goal is to try to get them to do some of the fighting for us. you know, Britain could hang out here. Because I played it like once in that situation, like Britain and was like invading this neck of the area. Afghanistan became part of the Comintern, and there was actually a pretty bloody front over here. So I waited for a year for the French and the British to, like, they scored like 1 million casualties on, like, basically that area over there was probably worse than the frickin' Somme. And then I just simply steamrolled them over here. I hope to recreate that event because that was probably like one of the more smarter ideas. But I mean, at the same time, though, if you were a German general in 1940, I mean, history visualized, military history visualized, the German dude. He explained it fairly well because whenever during World War One, the bulk of the German troops were over here fighting Britain and France, and Italy. Because whenever, like, they had Austria-Hungary on their side, but for the most part, like, the war was a history of Austria-Hungary being crushed and Germany rushing over to help them. But despite that, they knocked Russia out of the war. So back in 1940, when they're beginning their planning, they're like, hey, that shouldn't be that big of a deal. I mean, we have no troops in the Western Front. Well, we do have some, but they're mainly just garrison troops. So we should have no problem if we focus all our energies on Russia this time. So in that aspect, I mean, it's... These people... just rather train, I guess. So, in a situation like that, you kind of like, in that, you have to sort of like admit that they're probably more likely to, if you are a German general back there, then you might actually think that you'll probably be able to pull it off. And Oberost, that was like the occupation authority back during World War One. Because pretty much by the time Brest-Litovsk happened, they kind of like owned most of this area. If not all of this Polish area, like a whole lot of it. And they didn't seem to be like nicest of occupiers, but they probably like they ended up. I mean, I actually want to look more into that because we need MPs if we're going to be occupying land. But it's. As I said before, I think they would have been able to finish the Soviet Union off if they treated the Ukraine nicely. And especially if they were able to use them as like a source of manpower. And it's stuff like that. And obviously I wouldn't want Einstein to have to be forced to flee Germany. Because you have to admit that, I mean, people don't really seem to notice that Otto Hahn, Einstein, especially Otto Hahn, in World War One, what was he doing? Oh yes, I forgot. He was the one that was like designing poison gas. He designed chlorine, and he was working towards and he was doing mustard gas towards the end too. He was part of like a chemical warfare regiment. So it's like, like all these people that you learn to love. Okay, we got. Stop blabbering for a second. All right, good. Hungary likes me. Now let's get Romania to like me. But it's. They had no problem serving the Reich during the First World War. And if Hitler mellowed out his attitude a lot, I mean, or he just stopped it altogether, they probably would have had no problem helping him out during the second one as well. And I think that's why, because there were like 750,000 Jews, and as you do know during the First World War, they actually served on frontline regiments more than non-Jews. And, back during my earlier discourse about honorary Aryans, Hitler's commander was Jewish. And the interesting thing, too, is that he was allowed to leave Germany with all his money, and, especially, sort of after the Evian conference, when it was, more difficult for the Jews to leave Germany, he was able to leave. And that's largely just because, Hitler liked him, actually. So, obviously he had, so as another example, it's when they were friends, all these people that weren't, they were anti-Semites, but for the most part, they made exceptions for people they liked. And that's just one of those things that people don't really... You ultimately do want at least some sort of battleships, but we're definitely going to be U-boat heavy. But, it's... That was one of those things that people don't really seem to understand that much. Really do think, you could, change things like that if... The whole thing, I think it was just because people just being isolating each other. It's, one book I have on the Holocaust, I forget what the frickin' one it is, but, they're talking about, there was, this one guy was after Hitler got in power in 1933, a bunch of people were, beating up this one Jew in the class, and, an essay leader told them all to halt punching him, that this guy was a good guy and don't bother him because he's a good guy. And they're not interested in, you shouldn't be fighting him. There are other real Jews that are the real problems, but this guy's alright. And so you see, even from the get-go, there are it's not universal. And that's just one of these things, is that there's so many, not to belittle the whole thing. I just think in many ways the whole system could have been avoided. Even if Germany remained fascist, if they simply just sort of mellowed it down repeatedly. Alright, we got 6 divisions, we got this motorized unit. Let's build a second one of these damn things. What we got? Yeah, we got some good stuff. Good. But, a lot of that is... Well, I think, it's one of those appropriate... It's... At least I find it interesting. Alright, gentlemen, let's end this episode here. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, and I'll come back next time.